started. It had been opened by Mrs. Zhenya Nacheva, Deputy Minister of Health, and Mr. Dimitrov, Deputy Minister of Agriculture, and Mr. John Ryan from the European Commission. There was a special greetings from Mr. Chris Fiorne from the Health Minister of Malta. This is our first event on our presidency on the topic of healthcare, and we believe that this discussion will help the conclusions of the Council. At the end, there will be another press conference on the results of the discussion. I'm passing the floor to Mrs. Zhenya Nacheva, Deputy Minister of Health. Thank you for your participation in this event. As you know, the topic of Bulgarian presidency is a healthy future for Europe, healthy nutrition for children. The topic of healthy nutrition for children is one of the main political topics during our presidency. It is connected to the future of the European Union, and the accent from health care of view. It is proven that non-healthy nutrition is one of the main reasons for chronic non-communicable diseases. Is one of the main problems. We are addressing all main problems like smoking, like alcohol. We have a detailed legislation, and we believe that we can always do more, and we rely on this debate in this discussion. There will be a discussion on the impact of feeding on intellectual and physical development of children. We shall talk about about foods and foods marketing that are not only safe but also healthy, and also the need to preserve the unique diversity of nutrition traditions on the old continent. If you have questions, I will answer. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Nacheva. I'm passing the floor to Mr. Tsvetan Dimitrov, Deputy Minister of Agriculture. Thank you. So to say, the agricultural sector contribution to the healthy nutrition for children starts with the production of agricultural commodities, where we start with the health of plants and animals and prevention of non-healthy ingredients to come into food. The Ministry of Agriculture is applying two programs, 9th year already, two programs for healthy nutrition. It is school fruit and vegetable and school milk. We have about 77% of school institutions. It is also children in the kindergarten and the elementary schools. It is about 430,000 children during the last year. We have a growing interest, and the next I would like to mention, we have the new food law now in the Parliament. It includes all new European regulations, including ones Bulgaria has added to its legislation as new aspects regarding marketing and offer of foods. At the end, I will say that the Ministry of Agriculture, and not only in Bulgaria, but throughout entire Europe, we usually have the agencies controlling the foods, like in Bulgaria, and our main contribution is the protection of children from non-healthy food. It is the control from the field to the table of the child. Thank you, Mr. Dimitrov. Before we start with the questions, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. John Isaac from the European Commission.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the European Commission, I would like to thank the Bulgarian presidency for having chosen the topic of healthy nutrition for its first presidency conference and also as a subject for Council conclusions. The issue of childhood nutrition is extremely important for a very simple reason. There are huge numbers of our population at the moment who are suffering from chronic diseases, including in particular obesity. And it's extremely important that in the future we're able to find a better way of protecting children from childhood obesity so that they grow up in a healthier way and don't suffer from the burden of chronic diseases which our current population suffers from. This also has an economic aspect as well as a health aspect, because in addition to the large numbers of people with chronic diseases, we also have the problem of the cost of our health systems, where 70% of the cost of our health systems at the moment are devoted to treating people with chronic diseases. And clearly, if we don't stop in some way in the future unhealthy diets and unhealthy lifestyles, this will continue for a new generation, placing burdens on our economic and our health systems. So this is a very important topic. It's a very important initiative by the Bulgarian presidency in order to emphasize the importance of healthier lifestyles for young people so that coming generations will be able to grow up in a healthier way and not suffer from the chronic diseases which the current generation suffer from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Благодаря. Ще ви моля да се представите, преди да ги зададете и да ги формулирате кратко и ясно.
Please. Hello, Maria Cherneva, the news of Bulgarian National Television. My question to Mr. Ryan, how do you see our common policies, common efforts as a result of this conference, for example? What regulation or obligation of all EU member states could you work further? Mr. Ryan?
Two aspects here. First of all, we have a lot of European legislation on food safety and food quality, and it's very important that that legislation is properly applied and controlled in the member states and also by the industry. And I think the Ombudsman spoke earlier on this morning on the importance of citizens and consumers also raising their voice when they discover cases where the legislation is not being properly applied. But there's a second aspect which I think is very important, which is the role of ministries of health, ministries of agriculture, ministries of education. And those three ministries are working together for this conference. It's very important that school meals, for example, are healthy, that kids, when they go to school, have a healthy meal, and that parents also understand the importance of good nutrition for their children. And then in 20, 30 years' time, these children, when they grow up, will have a healthier condition and will not be suffering from the chronic diseases of the present generation. So it's a mixture of legislation, but also public health measures on informing health promotion, informing the population.
Благодаря ви, господин Райан.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Another questions? My name is Zlatina, the news of New Television. My question is connected to the nutrition outside home in kindergartens and schools. I would like an answer from Mr. Ryan and from Mrs. Nacheva, maybe. As in the school nutrition and kindergartens, it is the nutrition is organized based on public procurements, which are going to the lowest price, and it is and the quality of food suffers because of that. And would you please tell us about your experience, Mr. Ryan, and Mrs. Nacheva, about the measures that Bulgarian Health Ministry is taking?
In fact, there has been an important piece of work done at European Union level. First of all, each member state has national regulations or regional regulations on food quality in schools. And this is very basic. It means that the basic standards for nutritional quality of the food is laid down at national or regional level. But there's another aspect, which is the nutritional quality when the food is being purchased. And we have actually developed during the Maltese presidency, which is just finished, and we're now implementing public procurement guidelines to ensure high quality nutritional food for school children. In other words, foods which are low in sugar, foods which are low in fat, and foods which are low in salt content in particular. And this is very important because the market at the European Union level for school food is estimated at 87 billion euros per year. So this is a major marketplace internationally. And if member states together can agree to procure or to buy high quality, high nutritional quality food for schools, this means that they're sending a signal as well to private companies who are producing food, local producers and other bigger producers, that quality of the food is also a criteria for selection and for the purchase of the food.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Госпожо Начева, заповядайте.
Благодаря ви.
Thank you. You are placing a very important question. What the Deputy Minister of Agriculture mentioned, we have a special decrees regulating the nutrition of different ages of children. We rely very much on the results of dialogue that we shall have today and on documents that we are working on European Union level, and together with the business and industry, and we shall start the debate how to improve a child's nutrition together with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, and this is the one of the goals of this discussion within the presidency. May I ask another question?
You have underlined the importance of food quality, and because of these call of tenders, the quality of food is not a question, because the food has to be cheap, and when it's cheap, it can't have a good quality. You have also mentioned that the salt in the products should not be in a big measure, but we have a piece of bread which doesn't contain a lot of salt, and a very, very, very small piece of meat or cheese, which is also with less content of salt. But anyway, this doesn't make the food of a good quality. In this sense, can the documents, the official regulations, mean indeed what it's meant to be?
Само ще ви моля да оставяме възможност на всички ваши колеги за въпроси.
Последно
за
беше,
кратки
да.
въпроси.
So please
In terms of the procurement guidelines are exactly intended to solve the problem that you mentioned. At the moment, the choice is very often made on the basis of price. We are arguing that the health ministries should include, and the education ministries should include the criteria of quality, nutritional quality, as a second criteria for the selection of the product. So instead of having just one criteria of the lowest price, you also include the issue of quality, because there's no point in procuring food, for school children in particular, if the quality of the food is not there and if you're making the problem worse by providing that food. So this is a very important point. So we hope that in the future the Member States will also be able to consider collectively the quality, the nutritional quality of the food when they're procuring for schools, but also, for example, for hospitals, for prisons, for the army, for the other public procurement which goes on. It's a very big market, and this is a very important signal to industry. The second point I want to make in reply to your question is the importance of reformulation. Reformulation means that there is a voluntary agreement with industry, and this has been agreed by the Member States, that there should be a gradual reduction of certain nutrients in food, for example, salt, sugar or trans fats, collectively across the industry, so that you have a gradual reduction of the sugar content, a gradual reduction of the salt content. In this way, the competition between the companies is level. You know, you don't have one company producing a very salty product and another company producing a less salty product, but it's a change which takes place across the entire sector, involving the industry, and this is a voluntary system which is working at European Union level at the moment.
Thank you very much. Да, заповядайте.
Chinese information agency Xinhua Tayayanov. Could you give me numbers how serious is the problem with non-healthy nutrition? What is the percentage of obesity and overweight children in Bulgaria, for example? I would suggest if Mrs. Nacheva and Mr. Ryan, if they agree, we can send an additional written answer on this question. Regarding national numbers, I cannot give you numbers. They will be published in the report on nations report, which the Ministry of Health is publishing each year. What I can tell you, in the programs of GPs and experts in the decree of prophylaxis that the Ministry is preparing right now, and within the new framework contract, we are preparing measures and requirements and programs connected to prophylaxis and prevention of children's health, and there will be one of the accents in national legislation.
In addition to being a European Union problem, this is an international problem, and I'd just like to emphasize that. The United Nations has first engaged in health issues at the time of the HIV epidemic, the AIDS epidemic. The second big topic which the United Nations took up is non-communicable diseases. And the Sustainable Development Goals which the United Nations has adopted and which Bulgaria and the other member states have signed up to, has targets for the reduction of non-communicable diseases. This is not an accident, because the burden on our health systems, the burden on our economies, the burden on our populations is so big, and it's continuing to increase, that if we don't actually work on children's health, this will continue and get worse. So regardless of the individual figures for individual member states, which differ depending on the circumstances, globally and at European Union level, the issue of childhood obesity and nutrition is a major challenge.
Thank you very much. Господин Димитров, бихте ли искали да вземете ви отношение към...
Mr. Dimitrov, would you like to speak? I would like to add regarding the quality and prices, the optimal balance that we are looking for. For example, for Bulgaria, there are 20 million leva for the program of school fruit and school milk, and half of them are European money. So what we are trying to do together with the Ministry of Health is to make this balance in favor of children. Of course, to increase a price, it increases when there is a long chain between the field and the child. That's why we are giving the priority to producers. Regarding the quality, we are proposing the legislation to use in the school only food which is approved Bulgarian state standards or branch standards. These are foods that are controlled by the state. They are not coming just produced and they come to school. With these two elements, we are trying to shorten the chain, to decrease the price, and to have the state guarantee for the quality of the food coming to the children. Mr. Ryan, a question to you. In Bulgaria, we are talking about double standard in foods. A detailed analysis shows that it depends on different states' policies. For example, in Germany, soft drinks contain more sugar because German government is subsidizing the production of sugar cane. But European Union has a lot of instruments on the quality and ingredients of foods. What could be some common efforts, do you think, on that? Because industry is not only national, but the products from European Union are coming to Bulgaria. We are not talking about safety, we're talking about quality. Mr. Ryan, the double standards in foods is not a topic of this press conference, but as there is a question, could you please answer?
The European Union is fully aware of first point. President Juncker, when he made the State of the Union speech in Strasbourg to the European Parliament, specifically referred to this problem. I think there are two aspects which are concerned. First of all, the application of legislation. So in other words, the legislation provides, for example, that certain ingredients such as additives, but also sugar content and allergens should be clearly indicated on the label. And I think it's important that the product which is contained and the label are compatible. In other words, that the declaration which is made by the manufacturer corresponds to what's in the product. That's the first point. And that's a question of the application of the legislation. Each member state has to make sure that the products which are put on the market, whether the domestic products or imported products, correspond to the legislation. The second problem is in relation to consumer demand. And it's true that in different parts of the community, people have become used to different tastes and different products, and therefore the companies are telling us, the industrial companies are telling us that they produce because of consumer demand. And therefore it's important that conferences such as today underline the importance of healthy nutrition so that consumer demand can change over time. I mentioned to you that the companies have agreed with the public health authorities on a gradual reduction of some of the more difficult nutrients in food products such as salt, sugar, trans fatty acids. And if all companies do a reduction at the same time, this results in an overall increase in the health quality of the food. So there are different aspects here. There's the aspect of the legislation, and making sure that the product is properly declared and corresponds to the label on the product and to the legislation. And that's really a responsibility of the Member States. But finally, as the Ombudsman said earlier on this morning, the right of citizens to actually know what they're consuming is very important. And if citizens discover that the product does not correspond to what is being marketed, then they have to have the possibility to raise that with the authorities, and the authorities have to follow that up.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Lydia Velkova, Vox Radio. Two questions, one to Mr. Ryan and one to Mrs. Nacheva.
Today that the discussions of the experts today will go into a discussion of the council and potentially a decision. And it's particularly my question around the issue of marketing to children, which hasn't been raised in this press conference yet. Does the council intend on moving beyond the self-regulatory measures that the European Union has for the industry on marketing to children? Or would that be retained as a measure? И втория въпрос да задам или да изчакам за отговор?
Моля ви да зададете и него.
Госпожо Начева, в закона за храните, който беше прият на първо четене,
Mrs. Nacheva, the food law that had been passed, the first step in the parliament, do you have a position, what profile about non-healthy food will be accepted? Will it be the WHO? I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but there is no term like this in the food law. So there are foods that are supporting the non-healthy.
Discussion at the moment is taking place in the context of a revision of the directive on audiovisual media services. Okay. In other words, television, but also internet. And it's very important that in the context of these media, vulnerable populations are particularly protected. And we in the Commission have proposed that there should be specific rules in respect of the advertising or marketing of foods which are high in fats, sugar or salt, and which could be seen by younger populations or younger audiences. And this also applies to alcohol, by the way. We have specific proposals regarding alcohol. So this is part of the discussion at the moment of the revision of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. But the directive provides for voluntary codes of conduct. And I think the discussions which are taking place in this conference, and which will also be discussing the issue of marketing to children, will feed into the development and the management of those voluntary codes of conduct. In other words, the Commission is proposing as part of the legislation that the system should be based on voluntary codes. And this type of conference, which emphasises the importance of controlling the marketing of certain food products to children as part of our nutrition policy and as part of our fight against childhood obesity, will feed into the development of these codes of conduct. I might say that we already have many of these codes of conduct with industry. For example, the European Pledge, which reduces the advertising of certain products to children at certain times of the day on television, for example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ето това колежки е вкарано.
This is included into Bulgarian food law. What I can add is that the fact that this is one of the priorities of our presidency and that such an open discussion is held with the best representatives on European Union, that we are here, 3 representatives of 3 ministries, including the education. It means we are not formal on this formal, and that at the end of this conference we shall stop thinking about it. We shall prepare particular documents, changes at the end of our presidencies in line with the topics European Commission is working on European level on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Dimitrov, and Mrs. Nacheva.